How many of you have ever worked with a computer before? I have too. You may have noticed by using computers that there are different operating systems, and for those operating systems, there are pretty big differences between them. I will mainly be talking about in this presentation about the difference in operating systems throughout the years, different system requirements, and how these operating systems have evolved since Windows 3.1. For my preview, I will have 3 points, along with having a few subpoints with these points. First, I'll be talking about the differences in these operating systems. As you can tell, there are big differences between all Microsoft Windows operating systems. In this presentation, I'll mainly be talking about the main differences between Windows 7 and Windows 10, which is on the screen. I'll mainly be talking about the graphical interfaces of Windows 7 and Windows 10. Starting with Windows 7 uses a similar start menu to Windows XP, Vista 2000, pretty much all the way until Windows 95, which would be certain shortcuts on the right of the start menu, and then on the left would be recent programs that you recently used, and then on the bottom there would be button listing. You click it, it lists all the programs. For Windows 10 introduced a new start menu when it came out in 2015. On the right of the start menu, you could pin the apps you wanted shortcuts to, and then on the left, there'd be all the programs installed on your computer, and you can look through them through there. Next, I'll be talking about the notification pop-ups between Windows 7 and 10. For Windows 7, notifications mainly appeared on the bottom right of the taskbar as pop-up banners, and they'd be about the operating system. For example, it would show if you needed updates to be installed, or if Windows needed to be backed up, about security threats, stuff like that. For Windows 10, notifications appear in the Notifications Center on the bottom right corner of the screen, and has an alert that comes out from the bottom right of the screen, a little above the Notification Center. Those notifications would not only apply to the operating system, but also apply to Outlook if you have that installed, OneDrive, certain apps, a little more variety than there was with Windows 7. Next, I'll be talking about the Windows Update and security for Windows 7. Updates for Windows 7 only came out monthly with security updates, along with big service pack updates for bigger changes to the operating system, which there was only one. The current would be Windows 7 Service Pack 2. For security for Windows 7, it only had Windows Firewall installed, which doesn't do a very good job by itself, and would recommend having a third-party vendor installed to manage the security to protect your system. For Windows 10, updates for Windows 10 also release monthly security updates, but instead of doing service pack updates maybe once a year, there are different versions of Windows 10. For example, 1909, which would be the current, and 1803, which came out in May of 2018, that come out twice a year with new improvements along with hot fixes to the operating system. For security of Windows 10, along with Windows Firewall, Windows 10 has its own antivirus that it uses if you don't have a third-party antivirus installed, which works pretty good from all the people that I talked to. Next, I'll be talking about the different system requirements in these operating systems. Throughout the years, system requirements for computers to run Windows operating systems have changed drastically. Looking back to the early 90s of Windows 3.1, one of the first operating systems to come out publicly, and was more easier to use than the past operating systems from the early to late 80s. The system requirements of that operating system were 2 megabits of RAM, 8 megabits of hard drive space, and a 3.5-inch floppy disk to install necessary drivers and finish up the Windows operating system, which was a very small amount of hardware that needed to be used. Moving on to Windows XP, which came out in 2001-2002 era, the minimum system requirements for that operating system would be a Pentium 233 megahertz or better processor, 64 megabits of RAM, and 1.5 gigabits of hard drive space, and a CD-ROM drive to install the operating system. Now moving on to Windows 10, which came out in 2015. The minimum system requirements would be a 1 gigahertz processor or better, 2 gigabits of RAM, and 20 gigabits of hard drive space. And how you install that operating system would be through a USB flash drive, since CD-ROMs aren't really a thing computers have anymore. To sum up this point, the system requirements have greatly increased to support today's technology, along to support more of a stability for systems and to support more software for video editing and word processing and stuff like that. Lastly, I'll be talking about how systems have evolved in our lives since Windows 2000. Since Windows 2000, the Windows operating system has evolved tremendously, turning into something that is vital in today's times. An example of vital would be the current coronavirus pandemic, where everybody's online and everybody needs a computer to do their classwork and work and stuff like that. We see it run everything from servers to kiosks to workstations like in computer labs and much more. It is amazing to think that when some of the first computers came out in the mid-1980s, that we never get this far of what computers can do in today's times. What they could do back in the day were simply just word processing and very limited work online if you had online. Now they can run everything from video editing to advanced word processing to gaming. I have talked about the differences in operating systems, difference in system requirements, and how systems have changed in our lives since Windows 2000. Thank you for listening to my presentation. Good deal.